I wanted it to be, and thus I also knew what I needed to do to get there, the plan. And what I wanted to be, of course, was a professor. I wanted to teach Hebrew. I wanted to teach Old Testament. And at this time, I was in my mid-20s. So what happened was I finished seminary, I graduated, and I received a call to a very small Lutheran congregation in Wellston, Oklahoma. Anybody ever heard of Wellston, Oklahoma? Not surprising. There's about 900 people there. Nice little town, a little ways from Oklahoma City. So that's where I went. At this time, I was married, and we didn't have any children. But pretty soon, we had a daughter come along, and we had a son come along, Ariana and Luke. Now, while I was there, which was about 5 years, I kept in pretty close contact with the people at the seminary that had been my mentors, 2 or 3 in particular. And they kept in close contact with me. We'd exchange emails or phone calls. And already then, they were dropping some pretty unmissable hints that what I wanted wasn't just what I wanted. It's actually what they wanted as well. At least some of them did. They wanted me to return and be a professor, be one of their colleagues. But I also knew to achieve that goal, I couldn't mess things up. Because it wasn't like they just kind of picked a random guy to come and teach at the seminary. There had to be certain attractive qualities about you. Let's kind of leave it there. Certain qualities about you that they were looking for. Well, okay, what might these be? Well, you need to be a good husband, right? So I strove to be a good husband. You need to be a good pastor. So I strove to be a good pastor. You need to be a good father if you had children. I had a son and daughter now, so I strove to be a good father. Good colleague. I strove to be a good colleague. Are you seeing where all this is going, by the way? I got a goal, and that goal is something I came up with, and this goal is something that I'm doing everything necessary to make sure that it happens. What's my motive? Was I being a good pastor because I wanted to be a good pastor? There was an ulterior motive here. Yeah, I had my sights set on something beyond, in my mind, greater than what I was doing then. And so I tried to kind of shape my life in such a way that it was going in the direction I wanted it to go. Well, fast forward about 4.5, 5 years, phone rings one day. It's the president of the seminary where I had attended and where I wanted to teach, informing me that one of the Old Testament professors in the middle of the year had taken a position at a congregation, and they have a vacancy, which needs to be filled right away. Would I be interested? I'm sure at the time I said, well, Dr. Wimpy, I'll have to pray about that. For 1 second. I didn't have to pray about that. I knew exactly where I wanted to be. I waited to give him the definitive answer 2 or 3 weeks, but I knew exactly where I wanted to be. He knew the answer was going to be yes. I knew the answer was going to be yes. And so we began, after I announced that decision, doing everything you have to do when you're getting ready to move. And before we knew it, we're no longer in Wellston, Oklahoma, in a parsonage, in a town of 900 people, but we're moving into a professor's house on campus in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I began right away. They threw me in teaching 2 or 3 classes. Before I know it, I'm teaching a full load. I have to tell you, I loved it. There is nothing I love more than teach. I love to write, but I love to teach. I love to be in front of a classroom of people, teaching them about the scriptures. But as soon as I got there and began to do that, something started happening more and more within me, which had already begun, but which I didn't really sense was happening until I finally got to the seminary. You see, before I went there and started doing this, I would have said something like, I am not worthy of the position of being a professor and teaching there. But when I got there, I started to think to myself, look what I've done to achieve this goal, with a strong emphasis upon the I. And this didn't just happen because I've already told you this was my long-term goal, and this is what I was shaping my life to achieve. That was my dream job. I achieved my dream job. I got what I wanted. Now, maybe you've experienced this. Sometimes when you get what you want, that thing that you get ends up being your undoing. You wanted it so bad. You made sacrifices to get it, and then when you get it, it turns out to be not what you expected it to be. Or what happens after you get it turns out to be not in any shape, form, or fashion what you wanted it to be. Here's what was happening inside me. I'm a young man. I was the youngest professor the seminary had ever called. When I got there, I was 31, youngest professor on the faculty, which made me quite proud. And I began to think of my position as something that wasn't a gift of which I was unworthy, but an achievement of which I was worthy. They had picked me. Now, I certainly wouldn't have said this to anyone, but it was right there below the surface. Now, where does this lead? Well, you can probably all tell where this is leading, and it's not going to be something good, right? We all know the expression about pride. Yeah. Pride doesn't come before the rise, does it? It comes before the fall. What was happening within me was this ballooning ego. There's a Roman Catholic theologian that describes two ways of life. One is an ego drama. It's all about me. And one is a theodrama. Theo is the Greek word for God, all about God. You want an ego drama? All about you. You want a theodrama? All about God. Well, I was fully invested in the ego drama. And what happened as I spent more time at the seminary teaching, I got accepted into the PhD program at Hebrew Union College. Began now teaching and also a full-time PhD student. I began to speak in various places around the country. I began to get writing opportunities from our church's publishing house. Every single time something good happened for me, something bad happened within me. The pride began to rise more and more. That was the real problem. That was the disease. The swelling ego within me, the pride rising within me. That was the true disease that was infiltrating all of who I was. But that's not the way it manifested itself. The way it manifested itself was by, well, you know the way these always work. It begins with flirtation, and then it leads to fantasizing, and then it finally leads to the act. I was unfaithful to my wife.